Ryan's doing the.
No, I am.
Yeah, this is.
So, other way around.
We'll make a surgeon of you yet. Surgeons have to learn how to wear glasses and a mask and theatre, apparently.
Good morning all, and welcome to the Finance Committee meeting of the 23rd of February 2022. Very full agenda. We thank you for our attendance. This is our first attendance, our first meeting with under COVID red, where we have a split chamber. Well, the chamber certainly isn't split. We're all happy and agreeable together, but we've split with 50% away from the chamber and the rest on Zoom. It is great to see ORC taking a very good, very strong stance in ensuring that their staff and the people are in the best possible conditions for health and the like. So very difficult times that are testing everyone. Very difficult times for everyone testing their patience and understanding of other people, but it's a time that we will get through, and we will be better for it, and life will carry on, and we'll stick with this great province and make sure things are going along really good. So first of all, are there any apologies? We have an apology from Councillor Laws for lateness, so if someone would like to move that. Move Councillor Hope.
He's on his way, and he says.
Yeah, we know that. Yep, it is for lateness. And Councillor Calvert second that.
Yes.
All those in favour?
Councillor Robertson.
And Councillor Robertson, if we could take her. She's just popped in. It's excellent. We have no requests for public forum. And I'd just like to move from the chair that we move the current agenda as advertised. Someone second that. Second that, Councillor Noon. Those in favour? Just remind everyone of their conflicts of interest, if they have any that may arise, just to treat them in their normal manner and take care through that process. Just a note before we go to confirmation of minutes, if those on Zoom could please use their hands up icon. Absolutely feel free to wave, but if we go by the icon, your hands up icon, both Liz and myself will be doing our very best on a separate wee screen that we have here to pick those hands up. It's just often difficult to get on the main screen, especially if we've got a presentation. So if you could please use those, and we'll do our very best. And also, if you could remain on mute, and also in the chamber, make sure you mute your microphones as we go through the session, just to keep away from feedback. So that's just pass that through. So we have the minutes with us. I'm just refreshing my screen. Apologies.
I'll move.
Someone move those.
I'll move the
Minutes of the 24th of November. Seconded Councillor Hope. Those in favour?
Aye.
Sorry, can we just have a protocol for doing the ayes? Can it be hands up, or because it's really hard on Zoom for you?
Correct. We will
Can we
take.
just understand what the protocol was?
Absolutely. Well reminded of me, Councillor Wilson. Look, we will do for our votes unless we call for a division. If we just also do our votes, just a physical hand up to the screen would be much appreciated. Also say aye if you're excited and need to say it, but if we just go by hands, that would be awesome. So now we move to item 6 on the agenda. Very difficult to focus my eyes on the Port Otago team when they're not sitting in the room here with me, but we have our Port Otago half-yearly report, and we have the CE Kevin Winders on board, CFO Steve Connolly, and the chair of our board Paul Ray, and our audit committee chair Mr. Pat Heslin that are present with us to give us their half-yearly report from Port Otago. So Paul, I'll hand over to you and let your team sort through that presentation.
Thanks, Kevin. I think Kevin is going to share his screen so that we can have our slides up, and you'll just see a little icon of me in the corner. Is that the plan?
Yep, we're just technically doing that now and see how we go.
Great.
See that?
Yep. Everyone see that? Good. Okay, good morning, everyone. Sorry that circumstances don't allow us to be there. It's really good to be down there in person doing this and getting, the buzz of the room and the informal feedback. But we'll do our best to recreate that in the short time that we've got now. We're going to I'm going to go over a very quick overview, and then Kevin's going to get into a little more detail on operating issues and highlights, including COVID, of course. And then we'll finish with an outlook for the rest of the year and beyond. So same format as usual. So here's the group highlights. The tax paid profit for the 6 month ended December 21 of 6.5 million compares to 18.3 million for the same period last year. Last year's interim result included for the first time ever, a 12.5 million unrealised net change in the value of our investment property. And we didn't feel the need to do that again this year. Underlying profit for the 6 months, aside from their revaluation to December, was 6.5 million compared to 10.2 million last year. And that 3.7 million difference between the underlying profits was again property valuation, but property valuation that finds its way into underlying earnings. It's a result of development timings, and two projects that were completed in 2020 were included. As soon as we finish the project and it gets valued and rented, we book the earnings from that, or the increase in value from that to earnings as underlying profit. Last year we had two projects completed, while this year the projects that we have just as many projects in the works, but they are not at the stage of completion at half year. Now, the other highlight on this page is an interim dividend of $6 million, which is up from 4.5 million last year and will be paid later this week in February. The next slide. The revenue from marine and cargo services was down 12% following a slowdown in log exports and reduced container throughput. The container trade continues to suffer from global disruption to vessel schedules and container availability. Container volumes were down 13% to 73,900 TEU from 84,500 TEU last year. Lower tranships through the port and lower empty container volumes contributed to that. Export volumes were down 4%, but that's really just timing. We're an export port, and our catchment area is booming, and we're expected to recover that 4% in the second half of the financial year. Log exports are a slightly different story. We were doing really well until just before Christmas. Our log volumes of 441,000 tonnes for the 6 months were down 28% from the same period last year, which was 626,000 tonnes. That reflects a reduction in log export prices, and those prices and the demand was due to a reduction in China and demand from China in the second quarter. Demand just fell off a cliff. The Chinese ports were full, and log shipments basically stopped for about a month, almost stopped for a month. So while we expect that, and the log volumes are getting back to where they were, we don't think we can recover that reduction before the end of this financial year. These reductions in revenue from both container and marine services and logs have flowed through to EBITDA performance in the port, as you can see from the chart. Property continues to provide earnings diversity, which helps us through difficult port trading conditions. Property rentals increased 13% to 15.2 million, with recently completed property developments in Auckland and Hamilton positively impacting on our property business. Kevin will highlight our recent design build lease successes that are providing important rental growth, which flows through to dividends in the medium term. The next slide, I'm always delighted to report on the continued strength of our balance sheet. This graph should give you comfort that in spite of continued investment activity and COVID suppressed earnings, we enjoy an equity ratio of 83%. This strength continues to allow us to take advantage of opportunities to grow our property portfolio and to maintain a modern and efficient port operation for the future. We're now going to go into a little more detail around the operations at the port. So I'll hand over to you, Kevin, to take us through the next few slides.
Thanks, Paul, and kia ora, team. Start with cruise. So start with a negative. And clearly you can see there that we haven't had any cruise ships this year, and that's pretty obvious the reason why. But encouragingly, the New Zealand Cruise Association is working with most departments of government at the moment to enable the safe return of cruise, and that project is well underway. It's expected that the Australians have now signalled that they may open up in April 22, and that's a precursor always to cruise returning to our region, because 70% of the visitors come from Australia on cruise traditionally, so we need the Australian market up and open before the New Zealand market can return. So we're well underway and working and preparing for cruise to return. It won't be in this financial year, but we're expecting it to be in this calendar year. So we're all targeting in the industry October 22, but that's going to be subject to agreement with government. And clearly we are Omicron, and the wave of Omicron is it later in the year, which is yet to be worked through. So encouraging that looks like we could have the return of cruise later in the year, and pleasingly we've got our team still on the books that have been with us without cruise, so they're all ready to go and excited. So pleased to be able to gear up later in the year and support the return of cruise. It is a significant contributor to our local economy, $75 million regional activity. Cruise was going well, and it's significant to the port, so we are investing in its return. Paul touched on bulk tonnes, and there's the graph. So it's a story all around logs. Fuel, fert and other being LPG and fishing clearly was up, and it's encouraging to see that activity, but as Paul explained, the log volumes came to an abrupt halt in late November, December, and quiet in January, and recovered in February. So the outlook at the moment is a wee bit more encouraging post Chinese New Year, and we work with our logging customers in the region to ensure that they've got access to our wharfs and through to ultimately the supply chain around the world. So we look forward to that picking up a little bit in the second half, but as Paul said, we won't have enough runway to be able to catch the loss of volume that we experienced in December and January. So we'll be down a wee bit on last year, but still at good levels. So over containers, container business, as Paul said, the full exports were export-based to regional economy, so clearly 34,000 shoe versus 36. That's just timing, and we've got plenty of dairy product in our sheds dotted around the lower South Island that have got to get through and out to market. So the second half will pick that up, subject to impacts from Omicron, but pleasing to see there that imports at 10,000 shoe means that the flow of goods into our region and our city have continued at similar levels to last year, which is very encouraging. And then the empties and transship are just balancing. So a relatively good outcome for our container business given the circumstances, and we'd expect it to pick up a little bit in the second half, which is just starting to do now. So just flicking over disruption, and we hear about it all the time, but this sort of chart says it all for me. You can see the yellow line there, or Goldie line on your screen, which was back in June, July in 2020. Effectively, the impact of Omicron COVID got through into disruption around the network, and we dropped off from circa 80% reliability. So that's ships coming on its planned window 80% of the time to where we are today, which is still at those levels around 32%. So your planning is a third of the time it's on point, and the other 2/3 of the time the ships are off window. And we're very lucky here that we've got plenty of berth capability, and we haven't got a queue for ships to come in. So we're able to flex with our partners at Maersk and MSC to be able to enable their vessels to dock and to be serviced once they arrive at Port Chalmers. So we're in a good shape, but it doesn't look like it's changing. The outlook is very similar to what we're experiencing at the moment for the balance of the year. The good thing is we've had the Rios, which is our Southern Star service, become more reliable in respect of they've been loosely coming every week. The days vary a bit, but it's been a relatively steady occurrence, and it's been encouraging over the last couple of months. And we've had the return of our Americas service to weekly just on Christmas, which makes a big difference to our regional partners that use weekly cycles through to the key North American markets. So that service is back to weekly, and it will clearly benefit our chilled meat customers in the region. And it's great to have a better beat in the business of a weekly cycle. It enables our yard and capacity to be a bit smoother and not as peaky. So that's a good outcome, despite of the global disruption at the moment. Just flicking on to property, and Paul has alluded to the growth in our rent roll as a result of previous investments and general revaluations flowing into increased rents. So a great result there. And you'll see the development margin, which is part of our underlying earnings calculation. We had that 4.2 million, which was our Oak Road and Auckland property, and our second units at Te Rapa. That clearly came through in the last 6 months, and our timing is such that we've had none of those developments come through in the first 6 months this year, but I'll take you through when they're coming through later. You'll see there we're still strong in Hamilton and Auckland with about $300 million worth of value in those two markets, giving us diversification away from Dunedin, but Dunedin's still a key market for us with 42% of our property holdings there at 219 million. So yeah, good diversity, and obviously it has buffered our lower earnings across the port business. Just moving on to talking about our team, it's been a challenging year, as it has for most businesses, and we're well versed in dealing with COVID and Omicron. So we adopted a policy in November 21 to manage COVID for the business, which has been successful. Our Kaimahi is 100% vaccinated across the board, which is great for our staff. And as of Monday, we're 91% of our 300 staff have had the booster, which is fantastic defence as we prepare for the onslaught of Omicron, which is at our front door and our back door at the moment. We still have weekly surveillance saliva testing for all staff. So typically staff will get tested on a Monday and a Thursday, gives them confidence out of the weekend and a bit of comfort, and it gives us good screening to be able to act quickly to pick up cases. At this stage, we've had no cases in the business, but it's a great comfort for our staff to be able to have that testing. We've been through the usual split teams to reduce crossover and as we prepare for Omicron, and we continue to review those protocols on a daily basis at the moment as news and further direction from the Ministry of Health and the government comes to us. And we'd assume that we will be adapting to changes and announcements regularly. And over the next couple of weeks, we expect to change the regime to react to the red phase, where Omicron is prevalent in the community, and we're well prepared to tackle that. Our team's done a great job, really proud of them. They've adapted well. And they've had a lot to go through, so we're in good shape, and we'll work our way through what's ahead in the next couple of weeks. Just going to our wider team, we've had some long-dated projects, and this one I'm very proud of, to be able to show you some photos that are actually real and not Becker models. So we're very pleased that the Tauroni Beach groins are nearly complete. South Roads have done a brilliant job down there, and they're on site at the moment. They've got a couple of weeks just to tidy up and finish. And there you can see there Dear Smith on the barbecue looking after them. I don't think the South Road team wanted to leave. They were fed so well down there. But we've got to acknowledge, I think, that the work of the Tauroni Beach Coast Care Committee being led by Graham, and you've got Des and Graham Burns, and you've got Tina and Edna. They've done a magnificent job advocating for this great amenity, and it's been great to be able to support them after 10 years of effort. And we're getting really close. So in April, you can see from those shots, nature's done its job already and started to shape those beaches into lovely amenity beaches. And it was well utilised over Christmas. And in April, we'll start dredging the sand from our harbour as normal in our normal maintenance program, and then start to pump it up onto the beach, and then just assist nature with some support from us to build up those beaches. And that'll be an ongoing program over the winter. So later in the year, we'll have a great facility to enable our community to utilise. So nice to be getting to the stage. Another one we've ticked off our list after a fair few years is the catch fence at Flagstaff Hill is complete. And that's now the only thing remaining to fix that project and tick it off completely is in April. There'll be plantings go along in front of the fence to screen it, but there's already natives starting to grow up there and get hold of the fence. So very pleased with the outcome, and nice to keep our community safe. And if you've seen the ODT today, there's a nice photo of our staff car park, which has been opened this week, and that enables 70 of our staff to get off the road and park in a Port Otago designated car park to free up the streets around our community, as we committed to do a number of years ago with the community. So great to tick that one off as well. Just turning to noise in the community, this has been an ongoing issue. Really pleased to be able to move the Rio on from the New Zealand network. It's been a challenge. The Monte Rosa was the only unsilenced Rio. We had 7 of them in circulation, 6 are silent, and the Monte Rosa would come every 7 weeks and be noisy for our community for a couple of days. And due to global disruption in the network, Mercer were unable to get it into effectively dry dock to enable retrofitting of the silencer. So they've swapped it out for the SFL Maui, and that happened in January, and it's been in here a couple of times, and it's one of the quietest vessels we've got. So really pleased to achieve that, and our team in the community are pretty happy with that. So we're down to a 7 rotation of very quiet Mercer ships coming in here, which is great. You might have seen a few of these community containers. They're popping up all over the place. So down in the bottom right-hand corner, it's great to be able to support good initiatives, and we continue to look after our key partners in the Wildlife Hospital through to the Maritime Museum being our most significant program, and we'll talk to you at full year about how we're progressing that project, which is quite exciting and just underway now. So good people come and have good ideas, and we support them, and we're very open to supporting anything in West Harbour community and around our business. So good thing to do. Just over to our assets, and Paul alluded to this. We've been building out a Te Rapa Gateway Industrial Park, and you can see on the left-hand side, we've just finished the IAG building there, and it's come up extremely nice. Steel and tube due to be completed later next week, so very close on steel and tube. And our New Zealand window site has just started, so that takes through to January 23. So between the 3 projects is about $22 million worth of investment going in, and then a rent roll will follow in due course of about 1.3 million in initial rent. So again, it's building the portfolio and increasing our underlying earnings, which ultimately drives dividends, which is encouraging. Still plenty of interest in design, build and lease, and we've committed another couple of projects in this period that will go through over the next 12 months, and still good demand. So we continue to have a pretty good pipeline of work coming through over the next couple of years. And we're down to about 9 hectares of undeveloped land now, so getting through the industrial park. Another building-related project, Whare Runaka, which will be important to the team here. Obviously, we settled the warehouse acquisition in August, and between August and Christmas, we established a steering committee. Our architect GHD's on board, and Calder Stewart from Milton are on board. And you can see the initial concept work's been completed, and we're engaging very well with the ORC team and looking forward to the final development design next month, which will enable us then to go to working drawings and consent in June. And then looking forward to Calder Stewart starting construction in around about August 22. So encouraged with how that project's flowing at the moment and really good engagement from the ORC team. So thank you. I'll hand over to Paul and give an update on what the outlook is.
Okay, well, we've alluded to our outlook throughout this presentation, as you know, so this is a bit repetitive, but I'd just like to go through these points. Our team, as you know now, is 100% double vaccinated, and those eligible for the booster vaccine are boosted. So we have basically a fully boosted workplace at our disposal, and I think that gives us the best opportunity to minimise the impact of Omicron on our region's exporters, which is our highest priority. We expect that container flows and shipping will continue to be disrupted for at least the next 6 months. Export volumes are forecast to be similar to the same period last year, reflecting the lower South Island's export agriculture bias. We expect bulk volumes to recover in the second half, but slightly lower volume overall than last year because of our glitch in China over Christmas with the logs. While ongoing COVID and global network disruptions will impact our core port business, our property business will provide a key counterbalance. Our focus of investing in the industrial property sector in Auckland, Hamilton and Dunedin ensures the company remains well positioned to handle ongoing challenges. An interim dividend, I repeat, is $6 million, up from 4.5 last year, and be paid this week. Our financial strength allows us to look to the future with confidence. While there continue to be challenges, we see no reason why we can't adhere to our established dividend payment plans, which we've discussed at length with our shareholder. So I think it's a pretty positive outlook. We've still got some bumps in the road, but we know the bumps, and we think we can navigate those bumps and continue to be an important part of the Otago and southern economy while providing our shareholder with reliable returns. So thank you for your time. Happy to take any questions that you might have, and I will farm them out as required because we have Pat here as well.
Good. Thank you very much indeed. And we've got a question from Councillor Scott.
Oh, hey, thank you for keeping our port functioning through a really difficult period. And I'm sure the community really appreciates that. We certainly do. My question is regarding that key issue of shipping reliability down at, I think, 33% over the last couple of years. What strategies are there to get that number up? And what's the impact on your operation, for example, your staffing and this type of stuff, where, what's the impact?
I'll hand that over to Kevin to cover.
Yeah,
thanks, Kevin.
Happy to talk to that one. Well, I think the impact for our staff is that our rosters can be changed at short notice, which is obviously a bit of an issue for us. But we get significant sort of heads up from our ports up the network to let us know whether the vessel's going to be on time or late. So ultimately, we've got enough notice to be able to give our staff flexibility around shifts and start times. And because we haven't got any berth constraints on our wharfs, and we've effectively got our 3 visits a week, if a ship's late and off window, we can still accommodate it. We just have to adapt and shift our labour from the day we had planned or the night we had planned to the next day or the day after. So it's a bit of juggling, and we're well used to it, and the staff have had to work our way through that in the last 2 years. So that at a port level and a day-to-day level, it's just what we do every day. At a global level, the issue is that obviously all this delay, you've got ships queued up and queues in some of the big ports at Long Beach and 70 vessels waiting to get in. Those 70 vessels are normally typically running around the world delivering cargo. So until there's either a reduction global demand, or there's an increased supply of ships, which take 2 to 3 years to build. That shipping pipeline of new construction is quietly coming on stream, but effectively not at a fast enough rate. So I can't see any circuit breakers in the next 6 months to change that significantly. Apart from, we typically have a bit of a lull in the late winter as volumes drop off, and that's the opportunity for things to catch up. So I think we'll see global disruption and network disruption in New Zealand for at least this calendar year.
Thank you. Thank you.
Councillor Deaker.
Thanks, Kevin, and thank you, the Port Otago team, for an excellent presentation. It's not a question, Kevin, it's just a comment addressed mainly to Kevin, but also to Paul, I guess. I noted when you had the heading disruption on the screen that all of that disruption was international factors. The thing I wanted to comment on is whenever we hear news, as we often do, about disruption at our New Zealand ports through union activity or through industrial accidents, it's never Port Chalmers. And I want to say to Kevin, top-rate management, in the fact that we do not seem ever to have disruption from our own workforce, which is just great. The second comment I want to make is a huge thank you for the work at Tirani Beach. That's been such a long and important project. And it wasn't until you, Kevin, put your shoulder behind that project and gave it a very, very big shove that all that stuff has come to pass. And I'm grateful to you. I'm full of admiration for the work that's been done. And the fact that it's nearly complete is just a matter of moment of great joy. So thank you.
Thanks for that. I think the praise actually needs to go to the Tirani Beach team. They've done a magnificent job. We've just got in behind them and supported them. So Des and Graham and the team deserve all the accolades for their perseverance and their commitment, and they've done a great job down there. So we're happy to help them out.
I agree with that, Kevin, but it wouldn't have happened without your shoulder behind them.
It's a big team at Port Otago and plenty of support, not just me.
Thank you, Councillor Deaker. Councillor Wilson.
Thank you. Great results. And the only thing that it's going to sound negative, and I don't want to because it is a good result. So sorry, apologies if the question is, and it's really one for Paul. Kevin talked about the cruise ship market, and I get all of that, but I know Paul at the directors level, the directors have done some really interesting work. Probably, I mean, I'm sure Kevin's involved as well. Your carbon footprint. The cruise ship industry is acknowledged, I think, as one of the least carbon friendly activities or ways of getting about. And I appreciate that we don't necessarily measure it internally because it's an external cost. But as many of us are worrying about our carbon footprint, how are you as directors feeling that we are so reliant or hopeful of that market returning when it has such a high carbon footprint? Or have you considered that?
Well, I can't say we've directly considered that. You know, the best way that we can contribute to minimising the carbon footprint of the cruise industry or any shipping industry is really through, efficient handling of the vessel at our port. There's some talk about cold ironing, which provides electricity to the ship while it's alongside. Our infrastructure in New Zealand and our infrastructure through the power reticulation in Dunedin and beyond, prohibits that. So really, we are very keen to handle the ship efficiently, to get it in when they want to come in, so they're not waiting for us, and to get it out when they want to go out, so they're not waiting for us. And I don't know. I haven't really analysed whether the cruise industry is a higher carbon footprint than the aviation industry per passenger or not, but I suspect that it depends on which way you look at it. And having 2,000 or 4,000 passengers driving around New Zealand to look at the sites in their own vehicles or in camper vans would surely have a higher carbon footprint than a cruise vessel.
Councillor Noon.
Thanks very much, and thanks to all the Port Otago team for a pretty solid interim report in light of the situation with COVID and log prices, etc. I just had two questions. One relates to, I think when you mentioned, I think Kevin mentioned about the 9 hectares. I assume that relates to the Hamilton site, and I just wondered, in terms of further development, wondered whether there's still plenty of interest in future developments on that site.
Kevin?
Yeah, that's correct. So effectively, the Tarapa Gateway site was 43 hectares, and we've got 9 hectares still to develop as in stand-up design, build and leases. And there's plenty of demand for those warehouses that we continually build, and that's anything from 1,500 squares through to 3,000 to 5,000 square metre is our sweet spot in that industrial park. And I'd expect that we would just continually to build and chew through that 9 hectares over the next 3 to 5 years. And if the demand stays where it is at the moment, it's probably likely to be the shorter end of that horizon, not the longer end of that horizon. So yeah, extremely encouraging demand for that industrial park, and the land prices in Hamilton have recently, sold in our industrial park at $650 a square metre, which is significant.
I'd just like to add to that. We find ourselves in a very happy position because the many supply chain disruptions that we're seeing here in New Zealand and around the world is actually causing the supply chain to have to upgrade their warehouse capacity. And we're seeing a lot of warehouse change activity as businesses go from a warehouse that might have been suitable in a just-in-time inventory situation that are not suitable today when they have to carry a little more inventory. So we're seeing quite a bit of activity related to people upsizing their warehouse/office complex.
That's a nice segue into my next question, Paul, and it's just the time frame with regards to the whare runaka, and in light of the availability of construction materials, etc. Is there any update in terms of the timeline for completion?
Well, I think it's a good point. That's effectively why we're building with one of our trusted partners who are working with us here at the office museum build and alongside us with whare runaka. And once we've got a bit further down the design phase and we've got a confirmed set of working drawings, we'll start to indent steel and get some of the long lead time products in early, like we've done for our museum build here and our new office build here. So some of the lead times have been up to 6 to 7 months, and we had to buy the windows for our new building here in December to get them here in June. So I think once we've got a confirmed design, we'll just work through that process as we normally do with all our builds, whether they're in Hamilton or Auckland or Dunedin here.
Thank you. Councillor Hope.
Thank you. Thank you for your report. Can you tell me, it's a wonderful statistic, isn't it, to look to see that all your staff have fully vaxxed, and well done on that. Did you have to do any incentive to staff? Some organisations, there's always somebody that's just a little bit niggly or a bit uncomfortable, or that there's, everyone has different views on this, but I mean, it's a terrific record. Can you share a little bit more with us? I mean, we should really be shouting this out to all of Otago, how well you've done, enlighten any other businesses that, who might have some staff that have doubts about this. I mean, this is fantastic. But can you share anything with us that, was everybody just great, got on board from day one?
Kevin?
Anyone like to comment?
Yep, I can take you through the process. So clearly, as we all adapted to getting vaccinated last year, that there was, majority of our staff were very quick to get vaccinated, and we got a groundswell of momentum, and actually it left then the staff that were unvaccinated become the minority. And over time, our staff that were vaccinated were becoming uncomfortable with working alongside unvaccinated staff. So we worked through that process, and and went to our board and our team consulted and come up with a policy that effectively said you had to be 100% vaccinated to be in the workforce, and gave them support and encouragement to get vaccinated by a deadline, which was in late October, early November, and out of the 300 staff, and the push comes to the shove, there was 2 staff members that were chose not to be vaccinated out of our staff, which was a good result. But unfortunately, we had to let the 2 staff go, and effectively in early November, we were late November, we were 100% vaccinated. So since then, it's been a process of encouraging and making vaccination boosters available on site and pop-ups and enabling our staff. So the incentive was pretty straightforward for most of our team, which is to do the right thing, be prepared and look after your family and your whānau, because if you've got 3 boosters in, you're unlikely to get sick as if you've got 2. So we've got 91% of our staff with triple vaccination and boosters. So with Omicron at our doorstep, we're in good shape. So it still will impact us, but we think to a lesser extent. So we'll be enabled to look after the region's cargo, both inbound and outbound, to keep the supply chains going.
And just to add to that, because we're a border-facing business, we had priority access to the vaccine early last year. So our staff were some of the first people to be vaccinated in the country. So that gave us that early start. And, we also had the immediacy of every ship that comes in from offshore was a threat, and our staff protected themselves or thought through the protection they needed to provide against that. The rest of New Zealand that weren't so much border facing probably took a little longer to realise and act on that.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you. There being no further questions, look, to Paul and Paul, the board, to Kevin and his team, to the full staff, look, thanks very much indeed for the work. Hello, ringing in. Thanks indeed for the work over the past 12 months. And you've again returned a great 6-monthly return. But I think the key part that really is so important to us as people of Otago is that you are actually working exceptionally hard on supporting our community and being a good corporate citizen. So I think we need to keep that in focus and keep driving that along. But you work with Tironi Beach, your noise and your continuing community support. We want to keep that going with strengths, and we're great to see that that's a focus. So thanks very much indeed for your report. Keep the good work up. Keep taking that money out of the North Island, and I'm sure we'll have a very good 12 months. So just from the chair, I'd like to move that we ask the chair of Otago Regional Council to send a letter thanking the Tironi Beach Community Committee for their great endeavours and pushing ahead that project. So I'm going to have a second for that. Councillor Hope. The chair of the RSC. Yep. I'll be a security guard. Those in favour?
Aye.
Aye. And thanks again, Port. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Cheers.
Thank you.
Hillary and Kevin, isn't it?
Sorry. All right. We might just take a 2-minute stretch.
Thank you.
Thank you. Everyone, make it, it's 10:48 now. We'll be back in 5 minutes. Thank you. Take a stretch. Oh, can't. Yeah. I'll take that off the bonus.
Hold on, I've got to put the live stream on pause. We are still on live streaming, so just let me do something.
I've only got one motion here. It's the noting of it. I've only got one here. There's the note. And we one resolution. No, I'm absolutely as good as going.
Cookie boo?
I've got to move to another station. I've got just. No. Not- Oh. Have you done the, are you going to let them all?
And do you want me to stop my screen share now?
Yeah. Perfect.
Ready to
And
go.
then can you give me all the people up on here?
Or as soon as I come back.
As soon as they come back. Yeah. At the moment, I've just got the chamber. Oh, I see. As I didn't give an exact time to come back, which is very poor of me, we'll just wait another couple of minutes as everyone resumes their seats. Jeez, I clearly haven't done a rugby match for a long time.
Nope. Unfortunately, do not have control of that. It doesn't look like that on the live stream. It's a gallery view of everyone. Yeah, but
So on
the
here,
new system will be different.
how do I get this whole?
Nothing. So all you're seeing is the feed from joining the meeting.
So you're going to give me the people's faces back?
I don't know why they're not there now.
Yeah.
That won't do anything. So that's just a camera. There it goes. Oh, you must have had it
Yeah.
ready.
Good.
So we are live.
Gretchen.
Yeah, we are live on YouTube. So
Yep. All right, I think we are all back, apart from Councillor Robertson, who might just have a screensaver on. The finance team, and here's Councillor Robertson. Awesome. My apologies for not setting an exact time, so I can't go growly because we're 30 seconds behind, but that's good.
I was there.
No, I know you were. That's cool. So we move on to matters for considerations, item 8.
actions as well.
Oh, sorry, we're taking a step back on 7 because I haven't done that. Actions. Is there any questions from actions, Councillor Calvert?
Yes. The actions, the 21.109, which says that something's on track under Gwyneth's watch.
The lead us to a page would be good.
Oh, page 11. And we've got real-time data and harbour facilities and things, and they both say on track, but there's no. And one of them says on track, but it's due to be completed or whatever by 28/2, which is the potential of real-time data and citizen science input. Has somebody else got anything instead of Gwyneth for that? I see I got answers from Nick, and thank you very much, Nick. But that was a Gwyneth answer, and she's presumably still away on leave. Is she?
No, I'm back. Hello, I'm here. I just got back today. Sorry.
Right.
Yes, so my apologies. I haven't updated them since last time I was on leave. You got the real-time citizen start, the real-time data piece last time. As I said in the strategy and planning committee meeting, we decided to split out the citizen science. That one is some thinking has been done. But yes, we will. That probably will be delayed. Both of them were for us to consider whether or not we needed to come back to council for funds There was no timeframe put in the resolution. In terms of what we're looking at is whether we do it for the next annual plan or the next LTP. Regarding the harbour plan, again, the budget set aside in the LTP is for next financial year. And so this year, all we're doing at this point is scoping up what we'll do with that money next financial year. I've had a number of conversations late last year. I'm almost in a position to come back with a high-level plan with what we do with that budget. But as you're aware, I'm leaving the organisation, so I'm actually trying to find someone else to hand that on to, rather than present a paper and then leave it in someone else's ballpark. So it's on its way as well. So will that be reported to us again at the next meeting, or what? And because this says 28/2. Yep. Again, that's a self-imposed deadline because the resolutions didn't actually have any time frames to them. So, and as I've indicated, the harbour plan, we don't have any budget for this financial year. So really all we're trying to do is put in place something for the next financial year. And likewise for the citizen science, it's really about whether or not we want to come back and seek further funding from council around citizen science. Okay, well, if we could have, and thanks, Gwyneth, for that, if we could have a bit more, if it could stay on this action plan and have a bit more put on it for next time, so especially since there won't be a Gwyneth next time, there'll be a replacement, if we could possibly replace Gwyneth person. And so if we could have a bit more in there so as that the new person sees that and it turns up on their action plans and we actually get a reasonable report on those. If we could, Gwyneth, could that turn up on your attempted replacement actions plan? Yes, I will be updating it in diligent, and I'm sure that my actions will be assigned to someone else.
Thank you. Councillor Forbes. Muted.
Sorry, I thought I unmuted myself. I tried to put my hand up. So I'm just looking at these outcomes about the PT fairs and general discussions with Dunedin City Council, and it seems to keep ending up on the Never Never. And I wonder, especially as this morning I listened to councillors Jim and Jules from DCC on Morning Report. They're pretty upset, and we need to have that meeting sooner rather than later. So I'm wondering if that can be hurried up, please. There's a few items there around buses and transport in Dunedin.
So would that be a comment from the chair you're looking for now?
Well, I guess so, but I wonder if it should even be a new agenda, or if it should be somebody else's job to do. I just think it needs to sort of happen, and I don't know why it's so difficult to get this meeting together. We've been talking about it for about a year.
Excuse me.
I've got CE Gardner. Sarah, do you wish to talk to this immediately, or would you like to hear from Chair Noon first?
Well, I have an update just of yesterday, but I'm not sure what Chair Noon has, so I'm happy to go after Chair Noon.
No, you go. Sarah, that'll be excellent.
Okay. I've liaised with Sandy Graham and also her executive advisor on this just in the last day. DCC also passed a resolution, I think it was at the very end of last year, to meet with us. So what I have suggested is that they look for a time that coincides with their council meeting and ours. They usually meet either just before us or at the same time as us, so that we try and coordinate a time where everybody's available and around. They come back to me with a date, and then I would come to you. I also let them know that Councillor Forbes and their Councillor O'Malley had been in discussions previously.
Thanks, Sarah. If we can keep chasing that one along, I'd be very grateful.
Certainly.
Okay, good as gold, and council is happy. Thanks very much for that update, Sarah. Much appreciated. Any further comments? And Councillor Wilson, we had. Sorry.
Thank you, and thank you for Councillor Calvert for pointing out the real time, starting that debate on the real time. I think we got a report on online monitoring rather than real time, and the question that I followed up with from there was the real time data available flood and management, and I gather that's going to be another report from Gavin at some stage. I think what, and I'm sorry that the either the motion wasn't clear or the intent wasn't clear. I think what we need is a discussion with the community about what they consider is real time or the necessary time to hear and understand what the flood monitoring are. And that will be different in different communities depending on how quickly the rivers flow at times. And my concern was that there was data that was substantially out of date by the time that it was getting put up on the board. So the question is, or whether it's an action is, am I correct in believing there's a paper coming from Gavin? And are we going to have a chance to consult with the communities about what those timelines should be when it comes to the flood monitoring for civil defence reasons?
Dr. Palmer.
Yes, through you, Mr. Chair. We do have a paper on the flood warning system and these issues coming to the June implementation committee. In the meantime, though, we're looking at what we can do to deal with the lag issue that sometimes occurs on the real-time data.
Right. Thank you.
Thanks, Dr. Palmer. Any further questions on those actions? Councillor Hope.
Thank you, Chair Malcolm. The one on page 12 up the very top, we've got a provider paper discussing re-establishment of the Otago Regional Council Environment Awards. Have we got any update there? Oh, thank you.
Yeah, hi, Kevin, I'll take that. So thanks, Cameron. We've, look, it is overdue, recognise it's overdue. There has been some work done looking at all of the other environmental awards being run by councils around the country. So we're just collating that into a paper so we can bring it back with some options for council to consider. So apologies, it's past the 31st of the 12th, but hopefully we can get that to a committee round fairly soon.
Thank you, Mr. Saunders. Any further questions on actions? If not, we'll move to our item 8.1, which is our quarterly activity report, and that will be introduced by the governance report will be by Sarah Munro, Jasmine Lomori and Nick Donnelly. So I'll hand that to you, Sarah Munro. Are you there, Sarah?
I am here. Can you see me? Yep.
Gotcha. Thank you.
So this is our quarterly report on the performance at the 31st of December. We have done this a little bit differently to previous finance meetings. So in the past, you've received an activity report from Jasmine, and then you've received a finance report from myself. What we've done this time is we've actually merged those two reports together. So Jasmine will be discussing with you the activity performance report, which has the measures against the LTP. And then included in the second part of the report is the financial information for the statement of comprehensive income, revenue and expenses, the statement of financial position, the treasury report, and a detailed activity finance report. So I would just like to hand over to Jasmine to discuss her activity performance report and any questions you have on that part of the report.
Good, thanks, Jasmine. Thanks, Sarah.
Kia ora, good morning. Yeah, as you will see, the activity performance report, we've reworked the format to try and make it a clearer, high-level overview of performance at that activity level and at group activity level. The commentary is exceptions based, so we've only really commented where there's a change from previous quarter or where performance is tending to be off track, at risk, or where it won't be achieved. I won't go through the report page by page. I might just put it over to any questions from councillors.
Thank you, Jasmine. Have we any questions? So Councillor Calvert.
Are we looking at the whole series of reports or just this first one, or?
If we just did the activity report in the first sense that that has been introduced by Jasmine would be good.
So that's performance summary by activity.
Yes, that's it. Yeah.
Up to page.
Through the chair, that's page 15
24.
to 28
24.
of your agenda.
Yep.
Okay. I have a question on page 28.
Yes.
Which is and I guess it's all part of this public transport boardings. It says here may not achieve, and that's half yearly, so there's a full year that will be there, and this is only half yearly, but have we any reason to believe that we could achieve that or would achieve that, or that will happen?
I would say at this stage it's unlikely that that it would recover and increase beyond prior year. However, Dunedin last year had quite a lot of quite high recovery. Queenstown not in terms of patronage. So at this stage, we're just flagging that it's at risk. I would anticipate by the year end we would not achieve that, but I didn't feel comfortable kind of putting a line in the sand at this stage to say absolutely we would not.
So it really sort of, but it probably belongs in the red. You're just being a bit optimistic.
I guess I'm going with the numbers we've got now. I'm not making.
But the numbers I've got now is that we're not achieving.
We haven't for the first and second quarter.
So that's the numbers we've got now is the first and second quarter, and no reason to suppose we will really. So it's really a red is what I'm saying, apart from because for the second half to be above, it would need to be a lot above because it needs to get back to the
average. Yes,
you know, the losses in the first half. So is that just sort of being a bit optimistic? Should it be red, sort of?
No, I don't think so. I'm looking at the kind of the basis we work on is flagging it as at risk until it hasn't, until we've got the numbers. Looking for a full year projection where always it's a projection. Whereas the other things where we've flagged red, we cannot meet 100% targets because those numbers, because we've missed reporting on one thing. So we know it won't be 100%.
Yes. Although, so those targets really we can never say that they have been met. Or, I mean, we can say they haven't, like if it's 100% target and we've got 93% so far, we know that it can't be met. Correct. If, however, we've got any of those figures, we don't know that they will be met by the end of the year, even if they're 100% now. What I'm saying is that is this based on the half year we've already had, which is what I thought it was based on, the knowledge we've got from that. You see what I mean? That at the moment, we know that boardings are down for buses.
Correct. Yep.
That's all we know. And if we're looking at projections for the second half, we also know that for it to be an increase is hugely unlikely, really. So we've got two bits. We know what the past is, and we know what. I mean, we're not just dealing with these targets and service measures are not intended to be sort of optimistic ideas of the second half of the year. meant to be measures or see what I'm just saying.
Yeah, I see what you mean.
It doesn't make any difference to the figures. I'm just saying that flags wise, we need to have flags that say unlikely to be achieved or will not achieved, because we're going to base things. There's millions of dollars at risk here if the better we can predict the buses and the ferry, the better. And so it's crucial that we are honest with ourselves, or less optimistic. You know, it's not a thing to be ambitious or bold or anything about it, sort of. So that was why my question, is it really a red? If we've got no reasonable predictive idea that it would be achieved. But if you think it would,
it's not so. It's not yellow saying that we think it will be achieved. It's yellow to flag that it is at risk. The numbers, we don't have year-end numbers to categorically say it will not be met. Whereas the other percentage-based ones, we can categorically say it will not be met. The yellow is to flag that it is at risk and to draw your attention to it.
Yeah.
And if I just add to that, Jasmine, I think that saying that anything there is at risk, and that should be getting us as governors, and I'm sure staff are, is saying why that it is risk, and have the questions around it to be answered to give us that ongoing data that you require. So thanks, Jasmine. I've got first of all Councillor Scott, and then Councillor Deaker.
Oh, my question is just the big picture. There is on page 33, expenditure forecast actual versus budget, and the forecast variance, I think, for the full year is over 5 million deficit. Is that correct?
Yeah, Brian, if we could just stick to that first report to page 28 just at the moment.
I do apologise. Okay,
yeah,
that's
no
fine.
trouble. But we'll definitely come back to you, Brian. No problem.
Cool.
We'll just get this first one out of the way. Thank you.
Cool.
Councillor Deaker.
Thanks, Kevin. Two questions to Sarah, really, or it might be to Nick. I'm not sure, either one. By the way, if I get a lot of noise coming through my microphone, that's because we've got tradies here today replacing spouting and downpipes, and it's. But I hope it doesn't come through to you. The question is, and I suspect it might be where Brian is heading, to Sarah. These numbers, which show an awful lot of variances, are they used by, say, ELT to look at annual plan estimates again at this stage? Because it seems to me that the difference between the numbers being reported to us here by Jasmine and Sarah are quite a long way off what's in our current draft annual plan. And I would like to think that our annual plan is as up to date and precise as it possibly can be. So are these numbers from the report we're looking at, or the reports plural we're looking at, used for last minute reviews of the annual plan to make sure we've got it as tickety-boo as it can be? And secondly, Sarah, why are we persevering with the Queenstown ferry trial when it's expensive and it seems to be, given the light of circumstances we find ourselves in, particularly in Queenstown, it's a waste of time?
Okay.
Yeah, that's your question.
I'll take the last question first. And I think the simple answer is because you made a resolution that we do that. So I think if you want to do anything different for the Queenstown Ferry, you need to revisit that as a council. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, I think it's really important to note that we are this report is for the first 2 quarters of this financial year. Our work is phased. So what that means is not all of the work is evenly spaced throughout the 12 months. You have some work that actually is not planned until later in the financial year. And that might be quite costly work, like engineering works, etc. And so, you know, these numbers are a good guide, but they're not the only thing we go by, because we also look at the work program and the phasing of that work program. So that's important to note. Often you spend your money faster in the second half of the year. In terms of annual planning, we review budgets, current expenditure, and where we are with activities on a monthly basis. And of course, you know, like you, we certainly are interested in those things that pop up and give us some warning that we might not achieve things, or that we might be underspending, or that we might be overspending. And we use those to make decisions about what we bring forward to you. So that's where we have resourcing discussions, that's where we have program discussions. And my messaging to the team is, you know, the most important thing that we need to do is to do the work. And we need to do the work within budgets. But if we should underspend, then, and that's because we've been prudent and efficient and for all those other good reasons, then that is a more comfortable position if we've completed the work. It's not a comfortable position if we haven't completed the work. Now, I understand politically, you know, under or overspends, it can be a concern, particularly when you've rated the community. So we do look at those things in some detail when we do our financial planning.
Thanks, Sarah. That's very comprehensive and very useful.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson.
My question's on page, I think, 24. Sorry, just lost the page for a moment. 24. It's a patronage of the regional and public transport. And it's about COVID. Yes, the world has changed about COVID, but when we say something has happened due to COVID, are we absolutely sure it's just COVID? And Queenstown, I think the numbers there are very clearly that just isn't the tourist numbers. But in Dunedin, there are also opportunities with COVID to increase buses. And so I just want to tease out, how do we know it's just COVID that has changed the transport numbers and the usage? Is it that, you know, a cafe could blame COVID for losing business? It just may be that they've changed their beans and they're doing crap coffee. And I just want to tease that out. How do we, I mean, it's easy to rely on or keep on saying things are COVID, but equally, I think passenger transport numbers could have gone up because of COVID, because people haven't got the vehicles that they used to have given to them by works and a whole lot of other reasons. So I just want to tease out, when we rely on that, how that is. Can I ask you financially that, or is that a question really for implementation or something else?
Look, I think it's a very good question, and but probably should be directed to implementation.
Okay, I will do.
And I think we need to take that on board and get that through to there, because it is something COVID will continue. There's no doubt about that. We're in a changed world, so we probably have to change, we'll definitely have to change strategies on all sorts of things, Councillor Wilson. So I think that really should head to, it is a consideration that needs to be done and should head to implementation.
Oh, thank you. I will send it that way. Yeah. Throwing it to you over there, Carmen.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson.
Just on page 19, assessment is around flood protection, drainage and management. Look, I understand the explanations there, but one of the explanations given is that we had to reschedule things due to contractor resourcing and availability, but also including the low uptake of requests for tender, and particularly around technical works. So I just wonder what is happening in that space for us to garner greater input into that, and how are we attracting more contractors and more people trying to tender. So I'm just not sure where I should direct that, perhaps to Dr. Palmer.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. What we're seeing, particularly in the engineering space, seems to be a legacy of the very first lockdown, where a number of projects generally, not just ours, were shut down, literally shut down. And what we're seeing now a number of organisations like ours who are now accelerating and picking up, placing increased demand on the construction and consulting sector in a way that that sector does not have capacity. And so what we're finding is for some work, we're not even getting an interest in pricing it, particularly around consulting. So it seems to be a legacy of that first lockdown where people like ourselves are trying to catch up.
Thank you, Dr. Palmer. Any, Councillor Hope.
Thank you, Chair Malcolm. I'm not sure that this is aimed at anyone particular, but I do really like how you've set out this on page 20, where we've got the performance summary by activity group and we've got the colours. But can I ask somebody on page 21, you've got governance and engagement. Now there's the first one, which is achieved, and you've got the second colour, light green, on track, you've got 4. So if I go through all of these performance summaries by activity groups, does it mean that you've got 9, for example, in regulatory? Is it just telling me that there's 9 different types of activities that are on track?
Yeah.
And then you go through the next pages, and you've got natural hazards where you've got 6. And then you'll come down to, say, emergency management, you've got 3. Is it 9 of 9 or just 9 for this quarter? I just don't quite follow that. I follow everything. I like how you've got it simplified. Thank you. What we spend, what we don't, if we're in the red. But just that wee bit there, like for example, in government engagement, you've got a 1, you've got a 4, you've got a 1 and a 1 red. That's fine. But they don't necessarily add up to anything, and that's fine too. But is that what you're trying to achieve here? That we've just got so many for this quarter and that's what we're dealing with, or we have regulatory and we have 10. I just would like
through
a
the
little
chair,
bit more clarity.
I can provide some detail there. So if you look
Thank you,
at
Jasmine.
page 17, that outlines the number of performance targets we've set in the LTP for year 1 by activity. So if you look at governance and engagement, there is 7 in total, 1 of which is not achieved, 1 which is at risk, 4 that are on track, and 1 that's achieved. So that should correspond to those numbers in the circles that we're looking at. Those are the targets set in the LTP, and the colours are just showing how we're tracking with those.
Page 21 and 25 are different ways of showing the same thing.
Yes, I thought so, and just wanted that clarity. Appreciate that. Thank you, Jasmine.
You're welcome.
Any further questions on that report?
Yeah.
Happy to move.
Yeah, I know Brian's there. So Brian, I'm just going to go to Sarah Monroe now to go over those financial activity reports from 29 to 40 and then come back to you for that particular.
I was going to ask a follow-on question from the question you asked, Kevin.
Oh, no problem, Brian. Sorry. Yes, go.
No, good. It was back to Gavin. Has the whole contractor consultant environment actually changed? I mean, I think the answer is obviously yes, and you've said yes, Gavin, but is it a situation where good contractors and good consultants have no need at the moment to put in prices? They actually act more upon a negotiation situation with clients that they want to work with. And it comes down to our relationship with contractors and consultants and how they perceive us in terms of risk and whether we're really in the negotiation space as a local authority. Do we negotiate for work?
Yes, certainly. There are some activities where we've not had a problem getting a consultant to work for us. We have a relationship, a history of working together.
Yeah.
But there are other examples where we've gone out to invite consultants to price a job and they've said, look, we're not even going to put a price in. We couldn't even, at any price, we could just not resource that work. And so we're just not even going to bother pricing it. So it is quite variable. Having said that, you know, a number of our projects are going really well. For example, our shovel ready program is going really well. We've already finished one of those. So, you know, it's not universal right across every project. I need to say that, you know, a number of projects are going really, really well. And as I said, our shovel ready program, $6 million worth of work is actually going really well.
Yeah, I think my point, Kevin, Chair, is, you know, maybe we're entering into a situation where we you know, if we want to work with good contractors and good consultants, is that maybe we do need to look at our forward work program and sit down and have some conversations. Because as a local authority, we have a responsibility to have a competitive price, and that's really important. But it's also important to have good contractors and consultants that are available to us. I just leave that sort of hanging, you know. I'll be interested to see how we go in terms of availability over the next period of time and the calibre of organisation that we're working with. Thank you.
Very good thoughts, Councillor Scott. Councillor Deaker, just a question on that report again.
Yeah, it's a follow-up to what Gavin said before, which was a bit disturbing. And it links back to what Sarah said too about how important it is for us to get the work done in budget. Now, back to Gavin, if we're not getting capability or interest from potential contractors and consultants, what is he doing about that? Have we got work that's just put to one side and is permanently in the too hard basket? If we're not getting consultants and contractors wanting to do a job, what does Gavin then do?
It's not that the work won't get done, it's just a timing issue. So what we're saying is that some things are slower to start than we had anticipated when we did the plan 18 months ago. So I'm optimistic we'll get the work done. It's just that when you compare plan against actual delivery, there are some lags for some activities. Coming back to Councillor Scott's point, yes, Ms. Mifflin's doing some work around term contracts, you know, starting to turn it so that we're starting to think around longer term maintenance type contracts for schemes. And in Ms. Howard's area, you'll see in the report we take to Implementation Committee in a couple of weeks, we've established a biosecurity panel. So, you know, managers are thinking more strategically about procurement to address some of these issues that you're raising.
Thanks for that reassurance, Gavin. Councillor Kelleher.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a quick question on page 19 of the agenda, just again around future risks. We're highlighting that the RPS High Court outcome may impact timeframes and delivery of the RPS in the Land and Water Plan. Could I please just have an explanation as to what we're foreseeing as that delay and that impact could be?
I can answer that.
Okay.
We don't know is the answer. And we won't know until we have the High Court judgment. But we are boxing on with the freshwater process. And perhaps Gwyneth wants to add to that.
Yeah, I was just going to say the hearings occurred on the 8th and 9th of February as scheduled, but we haven't got a decision yet. And so we don't know what the outcome will be. But depending on what that decision is, it may have implications for the RPS timeline and therefore impact the timeline or the intention, which was in the original minister's letter, to have an operative RPS prior to notification of the Land and Water Plan in December 2023. But until we have that decision, we can't be clear as to exactly what the implications are going to be, nor what they will be on the timeline. But as soon as it comes through, then obviously we'll be analysing it and working out if we do have to make any changes, what those might be.
Thank you. Now back to Sarah Munro. Sarah, if you could just take us through the financial report stuff from 29 to 40, and then we'll have some questions on that.
Yes, thank you. I'm just confirming you can hear me.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah. So on page 29, there is an activity financial report table, which shows you at a high level the revenue and the expenses and the surplus for for each of the council activities, and that is a year to date. So that is for Q2. And then underneath that table is what used to be included in the main report, which was where it's an exception variance report table, where it just shows you any revenue variances and expenditure variances which are greater than 100,000 and the explanation for that. And then it goes through to a forecast of expenditure for year to date for those activities. And there's the statement of comprehensive revenue and expenses for the 6-month period. That is the same statement of comprehensive revenue and expenses, which is included in the annual report. So it is in the same format as the annual report. And underneath that are notes which explain the variances to those at the full council level. And there is a balance sheet which shows the financial position of council and also notes attached with any variances. So I'm happy to take any questions on those tables and reports.
Thanks very much, Sarah. Councillor Scott, did you want to come back? Thank you. Brian.
Oh, hey, thank you. Yeah, look, it was just in relation to page 33. So, and it's a little bit of a follow-on from what Councillor Deeker's question. So my question is, if you could just reaffirm what the projected surplus deficit is. My understanding is there on page 33, a variance of -5 over 5 million. But if you could just reaffirm that, so it's clear in my mind. And then if there is a deficit, bearing in mind that we've got 6 months to go, or actually probably less than that, but what are we going to do about it? I'm interested to know, as an organisation, how nimble we actually are. So, I mean, Councillor Deeker's question was an interesting one. You know, like we're progressing forward with with the ferry in Queenstown, where instinctively we all probably know that there's some challenges around that. And so, firstly, confirmation of the surplus deficit and the strategy for the next period of time.
So, Sarah, if we hand that to Mr. Donnelly, I see he's online. Good, Nick. But you feel free, yep. Sarah Monroe also to chip in. So yeah.
Okay. Yeah, Brian, your first question about the $5 million, that's only an expenditure forecast. So we haven't done the full revenue forecast, but we have done the expenditure side. So the year-to-date expenditure is a bit over $6 million underspent, and we're saying that's going to drop down to the 5 or 5.5 million by year end. So there'll still be some of that revenue. The revenue variance, some of that will still be under at year end. So we haven't done the full forecast for what the revenue position and the surplus is going to be, but we have done the expenditure side. Then, in answer to your question about how
well, actually, so what's your instinct though? You've done one side. Come June, what are we potentially looking at?
Well, without us having done that full forecast with the revenue and then what the surplus impact is, I don't have the number, but we'll keep working on that. But some of the revenue side of what you're seeing there as well. So while we're saying some of the expenditure underspend is going to pull back in the second half of the year, in the revenue side, some of that revenue potentially might, but things like bus fares, for example, and the ferry revenue that was forecast, those things aren't going to happen. So you will see a continuation of that, but we need to complete that forecast. But then, in answer to your question about how nimble are we and things like the ferries, well, the things that we've got in place, they have to continue until council makes a decision to do something different.
No, but it's hard for council. It's hard for council to provide feedback if we don't know what the forecast is.
Yeah, but when we look at those things, but your feedback might be that, if we got into those individual things, we'd need to do a lot more detail than what you get here in the quarterly report on something like the ferries or even on the buses, where what we've indicated in here is bus revenue and bus spend both are down. The net impact to the surplus, although you're seeing like $2 million of bus revenue, fare revenue being down, there's an offset of the actual bus cost is under budget as well. And we've got a net impact in the variance there in the surplus or deficit of about 400,000. Now, those sort of things might continue, but there's some things that we can do something about and some things we can't. Some of the things we can't do about, Councillor Wilson made the comment about, oh, well, it's not just COVID. In Queenstown, it is all about COVID. And what we had there, that we can't make more people turn up in Queenstown and use the buses. So there will be an impact. But what happens is there's an offset of revenue and expenditure. In Dunedin, it is a little bit different. The patronage numbers were impacted in the first half of the year by COVID when there was a lockdown for a short period. So that did have an impact. But the biggest thing that's impacting fares in Dunedin is the fact that we've got $2 fares and they're continuing. So we could do something about that, but it's not something you can do quickly because council will have to make a decision about changing fares if you want to increase the revenue.
Yeah. Is it fair to say that as an organisation, we're not very nimble?
Well,
no, I wouldn't say that. Yeah, I wouldn't say that at all. And I would refer you to the amount of additional work you give us as councillors nearly every time we meet, and the fact that we add that into our work program and deliver it. So no, I don't agree that we're not nimble.
Well, that was a question. But if we don't know what our forecast is, we don't really know where we stand. I leave that as a question.
Thank you, Brian. And Councillor Calvert.
Just if I may, a wee comment. I don't think that's fair, Councillor Scott, to say we don't know what our forecast is. We've just got lots of financial things telling us what we're doing, and I just don't. I would like to sort of defend what staff have produced for us against your suggestion that we've got no idea. We have got all sorts of ideas. Read your papers, Councillor Scott, is what I'm saying.
Hey, well, maybe you should listen. Maybe you should listen to what the answer and the reply was, Councillor Calvert.
I'll just interject there. Look, the thing about these reports and the way they are laid out, which I think is a very good way of doing it, are actually leading us to good constructive questioning. So I think that's very important, and we're getting very good answers. So, Councillor,
sorry,
Calvert, your question?
Yes. Well, the first of two questions. One of them is, and it may be I'm not reading well enough, but the consent processing. My sense is that the problem we've got there will continue, and there's two things. It's sort of got two bits in together. It's got the actual processing of consents together with other things that have been done by the consent processing sort of staff. And so I guess my question is, and I guess it's for Richard, is that divided so as that in an ideal world we could have the consent processing and that should be sort of self-sustaining because people should be charged for the consents they're doing, and separately when it's an educational component or whether it's a background thing because the rules have changed and therefore we need to. And Richard's made a great job of getting out there and talking to landowners and things and helping them through so as they do what their consents require and all those things, but they're completely separate functions. And it seems to me that the money problem in the middle of there is to do not with consents like it sort of suggests. So do we can we separate out those two lines so as we can see where the problem's happening and whether we just need to put more money in the budget in the sort of educational support consent holders sort of.
I'll have a go. The short answer is we can always provide you more detail. I'm happy with the way the budget's set out at the moment. The issue we have is that the chargeable or the cost recoverable time that we budget for the consents team to recover is impacted by a number of things. One of them is the education space, but I'm still happy leaving the target as is, because that's ultimately where we should get the consents team to. The other challenge that they have at the moment is the number of plan changes and NES changes coming through that require them then to go through training and all of the associated things with those. And it's probably more than you would ever expect to get in that 12 to 24 month period. And so that's had an impact on the amount of chargeable time that they've been able to get to as well. And I do discuss it regularly with Joe Gilroy. So I can always provide you more of a breakdown, but in terms of the way we structure the budget, I'm comfortable that consent processing as it's set out is the right way to do that. And what we should be aiming to do is to achieve the revenue target we put in the annual plan and long-term plan. And hopefully that gap will get smaller. We will be under this year. But again, we've got 6 months where hopefully we'll see more chargeable time being booked because there is a number of consents still in the system. So look, that would be my response, but I'm happy to provide you more of a breakdown outside of the way the budget's set out, if that's helpful.
Well, that's sort of comforting because it partly leads to, I've got a question and it will turn up later in the papers, I think, sometime in the next couple of days about the plan change 7 things. And for example, we've got issues there where we've got people being expected to pay a whole lot more to do a processing thing that they did in the first place because we put plan change 7 in the middle of there. And I'm going to raise, when it is appropriate, the idea that we don't charge people more for the change in their application for plan change 7 when they've already paid a whole lot to do it the other way. And I can see from Richard's point of view that it's appropriate we charge those people, but from our point of view, we've caused, and us, not Richard, have caused this problem for these applicants. So I just sort of don't want us to be holding Richard to account for making the consents pretty much chargeable, which they ought to be in the normal course of events, when there's other things coming into play. So I would like to have those separated out a wee bit, just so as that we can see how they're tracking. But I am comforted by Richard's response to that.
Ian, thanks, Mr. Saunders. I think that's a very good explanation given to us in that I think it was 2 years ago when we sat here and said there's a heck of a lot of changes coming down the pipeline. And I suppose as governors, I was always comfortable that our staff would get to a position where they'd handle it. But what we've never probably really factored in is the lag time between a rule coming down and actually learning how to drive the car with the new rule. So that's a very good explanation, and thanks for that help. Councillor Noon.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Hey, just a couple of comments, and then I've got a question. Remember, this is a half-yearly report, like we had from Port Otago, and I sort of often think sheep and beef farming, you get all your income in the second half of the year. So there's a lot of variables and things are moving around a bit, and we've heard the explanations for that. Really good in terms of the activity performance report tracking against the LTP, the way it's set out, and the discussion we've just had. My question is on page 30, and it's just under environment. Maybe a question for Gavin. And it just relates to grant income for Lake Hayes. And I assume the 600 that's already been received is the 600 that was promised by a local resident.
Yes, through you, Mr. Chair. It's the 600 that we anticipate receiving, not yet received.
Thank you. So the 294 income is coming from where?
I think Mr. Donnelly can talk. I think you're talking about the variance. Mr. Donnelly might want to comment on that, but there was a provision made in the long-term plan for a $600,000 grant, which has not been received yet.
Sorry, if you don't mind, I might just explain that. So the actual, I think it's confusing. The actual that's sitting there is 600, and that is the revenue that's being received, but that is revenue from other sources that are not the grant from the community, which Mr. Palmer's talking about. So the variance you see of the 294, the majority of that, 300,000 of that, and there's a small net off, which is what's making it 294, is that community grant that has not yet been received, and that was split up to be received equally over each quarter during the year, which is why it is currently sitting at 300 for quarter two. If that isn't received by year end, that would be 600, which is the total.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Have we any further questions? Councillor Hope.
Thank you. I think this, through the chair, might be for Dr. Palmer. It's on page 35, and it's to do with the Alexandra flood protection income, 125,000 below budget. This Contact Energy would pay for flood protection measure a similar level to prior, but at the moment there's no agreement with Council and Contact Energy. Is this a position we don't usually find ourselves in? And I see it's being currently negotiated. How's that going? Please. I guess I'm trying to find out, are we nervous about this, or we'll know that Contact will come to the party?
Well, through you, Mr. Chair, I think Mr. Donnelly can comment on it, but the background is that for probably the last 15 years, been looking to put in place formal agreement around Contact Energy's contribution. At one point, Council was looking at a lease arrangement with the flood infrastructure, but then we agreed to not pursue that. But it's really probably a matter for Mr. Donnelly to comment on where things are at the minute with the situation with Contact.
Have you, Councillor Hope?
Yes, but I wouldn't mind if...
And Mr. Donnelly, you've got a comment to go with that? Unmute.
Microphone.
Sorry, this is an issue that we've mentioned numerous times around this table, either mainly when we're doing LTPs and annual plans, but right from the period where that scheme was first set up, there was never a formal agreement put in place. So Contact does pay every year, but we have to go through a long, drawn-out negotiation process to get them to agree how much they're going to pay. And they're a commercial entity, and they look to they want to pay as little as possible. So it goes on, as the comment says. Negotiations are still going on this year about exactly how much they're going to pay. But we factor into our revenue and financing policy, as per the LTP, is that they are meant to pay, I think it's 98% of all the cost. But you've got to get them to agree to how much they're going to pay. And it's a difficult, drawn-out process every year. We've discussed about whether this is the right way to do this and whether we should be looking to create a rate so that we can rate fund this. But there hasn't been an agreement to go down that route.
Councillor Hope?
Yeah.
Understand?
Food for thought. Thank you.
Thank you.
I do understand.
If there is any further questions, we note that paper, and thank you to Sarah Munro, or both Sarahs, because they both commented, but Sarah Munro and Jasmine very much appreciated the report, and we look forward to the next quarter. And thanks for your help.
Happy to move it.
Oh, yeah, I'll be to do that. Councillor Calvert moved that we note it, seconded Councillor Hope. Those in favour?
Aye.
So we move on to 8.2, and we'll have on board Mr. Donnelly and Mr. Rosler to take us through this. So this is the draft Annual Plan 2022-23 and its engagement approach. Remembering, of course, that this is year 2 of our long-term plan, which we decided a very few months ago. So I'm just going to hand that straight, and we've got 8 resolutions that we've got to pass, and I'm going to hand that straight over to Mr. Donnelly and Mr. Rosler to take us through before we have some comment.
I'll just jump in if that's okay, Nick.
Yep.
Yeah, so thanks, Chair. Look, the report, at a broad level, the report is asking the committee today for two things. The first is that staff are looking for a firm position on our draft financial estimates, and I'll touch on that in a wee bit. And importantly, that will enable me to bring back to the March council meeting whatever communications material is required to enable you, council, to engage with community and then push the go button on whatever that communication/engagement is. And then, so that segues into the second ask in this report, which is directing staff on that engagement option, of which there are 3 provided in the report. And importantly, I'd argue that, you know, while I've given a preferred option, I don't think it's that clear cut. So I think there'll be possibly some discussion and direction required from you on that. And just at a high level, that discussion is really around there's no change in our LTP as the chair sort of outlined. We've got this COVID spike occurring right in the middle of you know, when we'd probably be looking at engaging, and ORC has a land and water plan engagement program. And, you know, perhaps there's some discussion around, you know, should we be keeping focus on that, or what does that mean in terms of distracting the public with multiple campaigns? So I'm just sort of signaling what the sort of key things are, key discussion points are around that whole engagement approach. So look, jumping into the report and looking at the financial estimates. You've got on there page 44 on table 1, you've got the estimates as they stood at the 9 December meeting with you. And you've got that total figure on the right-hand column there of 109 million, which is where we landed. And you sent us a way to pare that back with a total average rating target of 18%. Staff have gone away and have worked on that and have pared it back to that 18%. And you can see the result of that in table 3 on page 45, where that expenditure figure has now dropped from that 109 back to 108.8 million, which gets you your 18% figure, which is the LTP year 2 forecast figure. And there's just a wee note in there, just reminding councillors around, you know, that expenditure increase there is largely grant funded works, so has no impact on rates. And then the other, sorry, just have a wee drink here. Hopefully it's not COVID. And then the other aspect there is fees and charges on page 46, and you can see some amendments there, which the scale of charges are relatively minor in terms of significance. And then in table 7 there, you've got probably the more significant one is the publicly notified application deposit moving from 10 to 15, which is more reflecting the average cost, or the actual average cost, getting it more aligned. So that's the financial bit. So I'll stop there for any questions on that and get some discussion around that. And Nick might want to jump in if he feels the need.
First question. Thank you, Mike. First question, Councillor Deaker.
Thanks, Kevin. Yeah, Mike, thanks for the report. Very comprehensive and thorough as usual. My observation is that as soon as the ratepayers are reminded that they have an 18% rate increase coming up in the next 12 months, then community engagement problems will tend to disappear a bit because there'll be a general level of anger and concern about another whomping great rate increase from ORC, and they will want to tell us about that, and that's good. I hope they do. My main question, though, Mike, is the community survey we conducted last year was particularly helpful in terms of telling us what our ratepayers consume in the way of media, including local papers and local radio stations, as well as our conventional digital channels that we tend to rely on, I think, probably too much. What I want, Mike, is reassurance from you that the people who planned the options for engagement on the annual plan looked thoroughly at that community survey report and were guided by that in terms of how we should engage with our Otago communities. Can you give me that reassurance that those results were carefully thought through in planning the options you presented? And by the way, I support option one by and large, but let me be reassured if you can, Mike.
Well, yes, perception's obviously an important consideration, and absolutely, it's been in the background around this. And I think you're landing on the point of which, and I thank you for this, the segue into the discussion around option one, which possibly addresses the perception issues that you're sort of indicating. Which is going out with an ability for the general public to give us feedback, and if it happens to be angst around our rating increase, well, so be it. I'm not sure, as an aside, I'm not sure what that does for public perception, but park that. Versus option three, which is going out there with a straight communication around our intentions to roll out year 2 of our LTP as consulted, as adopted in June last year. And we just get on with it. So to me, that's the guts of the decision, I think.
Yeah, with respect, Mike, and through you, Kevin, you haven't really answered my question about the community survey results.
Councillor Deaker, Mr. Saunders is going to chip in on that to give you some greater clarity.
Hi, Michael. So yes, absolutely. So the community surveys now is probably our best, or certainly our most recent tool in terms of having a look at how the community tell us they receive our information. And I think what we can take from that is it's incredibly broad, which doesn't necessarily help us, but shows us that we have to be thinking broadly rather than narrowing our focus. And I noticed there's been some other work done. There's a University of Otago study done on social media and the use of that by councils and Dunedin and ORC as well, that we can take some learnings from that. So yes, absolutely, it's informing the work that the communications and marketing team are doing when they develop these types of plans, and it will continue to. But I think my message there is what you could take from the survey is actually we need to continue to think broadly and not narrow our focus to a particular type of media when we're thinking engagement.
Yeah, thanks, Richard. That's good stuff. I tend to agree with everything you said, but would still emphasise the fact that COVID is going to be peaking at the wrong time as far as we're concerned. If we ever thought about having community meetings, I think those thoughts have to be dispelled. People aren't simply going to go out and meet. They're not doing it now, and they're even less likely to do it when we're wanting to consult. And I do think the emphasis, Richard, needs to be on community-based media rather than broadcast media. Thank you.
In which I'm just going to reflect back to a statement that our CE said very much earlier, and I'm sure will be taken on board by our communication team, that we are in fact a nimble organisation. So I'm sure what is in front of us at the time, we will reflect that. So very good questions. I'm going to Councillor Calvert, Councillor Kelleher, then Councillor Scott.
My question's around the increase in the fees and charges, which although they're not big in our general budgetary sense, they are big for the people who are paying them. And they're page 46. I have asked, and I'm not totally sure that I understand what the answer behind this is, in that I gather it says it's to recover the revenue shortfall. That doesn't explain why they would go up in a particular fashion. I mean, the fact that we're short of money doesn't make an actual and reasonable charge go up. It should go up because there's a proper actual and reasonable increase in the cost of whatever it is, it seems to me. And we already, if the deposit has gone from 10 to 15 because the actual average amount that a notified consent costs is 50% higher, clearly these are more complicated and taking more time to do, and all sorts of things are in behind that. But those things don't impact on the actual cost per hour that we're charging. So the question is, why should, partly, there's two bits of the question, why should they be going up by the amount they're going up? What's behind those figures? And they're different amounts, and I don't understand why they would be different. You know, if our wages have gone up, you know, if we're paying people 5% more than what with the government thing, that ends up 7% more or whatever. But I don't see why they'd be different for different people. And the second thing is, if we're using consultants instead of our people, and we choose to do that, or it's because we haven't got enough people or whatever, we've got there that's an actual cost recovery thing. And that's really concerning, because what we had been hearing before is if we get consultants, that it costs the same because they are experienced and do it in less time. So they might be charging more per hour, but fewer hours. And so it's the same cost. If what we're hearing now is that we choose consultants and they just charge whatever, that's a problem to me, because that doesn't necessarily get actual and reasonable into the picture again.
Firstly, I'll go to Mr. Saunders.
Yep. So I'll try and take, I think, three questions there. So maybe just start at the end and work backwards. So nothing's changed. Nothing's changed in terms of the consultants. So we it is they are charged on actual costs, but we keep a very close eye on those. The same concept we've explained around the table a few times at Regulatory Committee before, where we do anticipate in some instances the consultants we use have a slightly higher hourly rate, but because of their experience, they are able to deliver the service quicker, which reduces the cost. All of the consultant invoices and the consent costs are reviewed by the team leaders or the manager before they go out to ensure there's consistency across the board. So I'm comfortable with that. There's also a process in place now where someone lodges a consent, they're given the option to request an internal processing officer, on the understanding that may result in a delay of their application But we're happy to accommodate that where they would rather not have a consultant involved. So that's part of the process that Joe's introduced, and some people are taking us up on that. Some don't have that preference. They'd rather just get things underway. So nothing's changed in the consultant space, and we do keep a very close eye on the fees and the hourly rates and the overall consent costs. The deposits are just a reflection of a better understanding of how much consents are costing us. So as we process more of them, we get a better idea. We can try and get the deposits to more accurately reflect what the overall cost of a consent will be. That then reduces additional invoices at the end of the process, and we Joe's now included as part of the consent process updates along the way to ensure people understand how the costs are tracking against the deposit they may have paid and where they might expect to pay additional. It'd be fair to say the deposits still aren't spot on, but Sean, Gary and the finance team's done a lot of really good work analysing previous consents and feeding that information through to myself and Joe so we can make some calls on those deposits amounts. So yes, the notifieds are just simply a basis of they're an expensive process to go through, and even at 15 there will be costs over and above that, but it's getting closer. The last one, and I might hand to either Nick or Sean at the end of this if they're on the call, just to talk a little bit about how hourly rates are built up, because I'm not 100% across that, but there's a few things that come into this. One is just purely we're trying to get some consistency in hourly rates within the resource consent field. So we look at hourly rates for Southland, Environment Canterbury and ourselves and try and get some consistency there. Obviously, our salaries do come into it, as do our overheads. But there's a reasonable hourly rate that is paid nationally, and we're trying. Ours were too low; they were significantly lower than other regional councils. So we're trying to align them, which will help us achieve the revenue targets that we're being set. But certainly, Hilary, you're right that the revenue target on its own is not the only thing driving this. There's a number of other things we look at as part of the process to better align our hourly rates to reflect not only our internal salaries, overheads and charges as a hourly rate that suits that, but also as a fee that's charged within the resource management field around the country and around other resource consent teams when they're processing consents within their councils. So that's there. And the reason some have changed more than others is, again, just a reflection of us looking at other councils and the way that those levels or those tiers are charged within those councils. I don't know if Nick's got anything to add in terms of how the hourly rate's built up from, but that would be my explanation of it.
Thank you.
I'll just go to Mr. Donnelly first. Did you have anything to add, Nick?
It's complicated. Behind the scenes, Sean is doing a lot of calculation that's around, around all the costs that are going into that area, and then looking at the various levels of the staff, and then there's obviously there's averaging of various things like salaries. But Richard's right. Once we've looked at that, one of the key things that's happened here is the part of this of changing this is having looked at what's happening elsewhere, particularly either side of us in Southland and Canterbury. And our rates are quite a bit below theirs. So these rates that are being proposed is sort of bringing us more into the industry norm. And so we do all of that, but our rates haven't changed for some time, is the other thing. And we didn't actually change our rates for the LTP because we were going through a process of looking at this. So basically, we're bringing that in now and aligning our rates to where they really should have been. If we had had the time, we would have potentially done this work and had it going through as part of the LTP rather than this year.
Thank you, Councillor Calvert.
Yeah, that's really helpful on all those answers. Thank you. I would like, when we're doing something like that, for those explanations to be in there, because I think we owe to the people out there, that's their money we're spending, and we owe the respect of treating it as if it matters. And so all the things that go into that is really helpful. If people can look themselves and see why we came up with those, and then they can think, oh, well, yeah, fair enough, or whatever. At least we are treating those with the respect of not just saying, oh, well, you know, they always go up or whatever. So that's really helpful. And if we could have a wee bit more background next time one of those comes up, would be really good. Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen, for that explanation. So we go to Councillor Kelleher.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, my question was exactly the same. So thanks for that explanation, and definitely reiterate the comment made by Councillor Calvert around having that explanation there, because it has been pretty light, really. It was just almost an expectation. My question remains, though, around the deposits, because that is a substantial increase. And I suppose, are we actually saying that the deposit is now not a deposit? It is we really are looking to front load the entire cost of a publicly notified consent application. And then there's always going to be a balancing act at the end. So I don't quite buy into the concern around invoicing at the end, because there's always going to be invoicing at the end. It'll either be costs over and under. But the higher we front load that cost at the start could be quite detracting to our community around actually applying for publicly notified consent applications. So is the intention that we would rather not be seeing publicly notified applications, because that is a substantial increase?
Saunders.
Do you want me? I'll answer that.
Okay, sorry. Yep, sorry.
Yeah. Publicly notified, we actually don't have a lot of publicly notified consents, and I think last year or the last calendar year there might have only been one. That's not the idea with deposits. Is that, you know, they should, if you like, they should cover the average cost of that consent. It is difficult with the publicly notified when there's not a lot. But publicly notified consents will actually end up costing significantly more than that, because they can and usually do lead to hearings. So obviously the deposit isn't covering that. Before any hearings that you might get on a publicly notified consent, they have to pay those, the estimated cost of the hearings before it commences as well. So the whole idea of deposits is that not just publicly notified, because there's so few, but more for the other ones, is that it should actually, once they've paid that, on average, that should pretty much be where the cost finishes. Ideally, you don't want to get into having a lot of unders and overs, particularly overs, to then go and bill later on, because anything over and above the deposit can be challenged, and that's where you get into objections as to cost. And you run the risk that you're not actually going to recover the money that you spent processing the consent.
Mr. Chairman, though, doesn't that leave the situation that you, if you front load the cost, so you've paid it all up front, then, through the process, you have the ability to withdraw if the application changes, or as you gather more information and you prepare for the latter stages of the process. If you've front loaded the total cost, wouldn't you then be left with potentially not recouping that cost in the end? Which is why it should be a deposit, and then you meet the costs, the true and actual costs, as you follow through the process.
Just quickly,
Just going to say that if you get to that point and it's withdrawn, then the costs to that point are totaled up, and anything that's left, that if the deposit was higher than that, is refunded. So it works both ways.
But you're always going to have some end accounting depending on the true and actual outcome of this process. And I don't know. I just receive constant complaints from community about our charges and our costs and through these processes. So, especially with the addition of consultants and sort of very vague descriptions. So the concern would be that those very vague descriptions and consultants' fees are lumped in, and then with no ability to recoup them or challenge them afterwards if that front-loaded cost is too high.
Yeah, I'll take that one, Nick. So look, there's the deposit's trying to give as best reflection as we can about what the actual cost of that process might be. I mean, I know we get constant complaints, but I think there's got to be a bit of a reality check about what these processes actually cost. And we've done a huge amount of work on the website, and we communicate regularly with consultants to talk through what the process is and information about what people may expect the cost of a consent would be. We've changed the invoicing, and you know that because we've brought it to regulatory committee to give better definitions of what those costs associated with processing are. So definition, we break out the consultant's costs, we put them in there. So look, the deposit is really just trying to get as close a reflection as possible to what the actual cost of that consent will be, and get that up front. If we don't use it, we absolutely refund it. And if it goes over, then yes, you're right, Gary, there is an accounting process to take place at the end, and that happens on the majority of consents at the moment, and probably will still keep happening on a majority of them based on these deposits. But those few changes that are proposed there are just to try and better align what we do know in terms of notifications, that new deemed permitted activity cost, and the 417. So that's how that's the reason that they're in there.
Look, I would also add to that, I think one of the, and just been working with Joe Gilroy lately on a couple of consents, and I think one of the key things that we need to get through to our people applying for consents, and this appears to be what Richard and his team are doing now, is to ensure that they have that good discussion and that good education at the start of the process. Take the time to spend with the staff to really get that analysis, to really find out where they're heading. And that's, I can reflect on a couple that I've been dealing with latterly, that the people who were anxious at the start have gone through that process with Joe and her team and are now very happy. Still don't want to pay the bill, but they will pay the bill because they now understand it and know where it's at. But and the converse of that is we always should be ensuring that we are spending the least of ratepayers' money to get these decisions made. So we've got to keep a check on that. It's just not a way of making money, but it's that education and that clarity at the start of the process, I think, is absolutely critical. Councillor Scott.
Yeah, no, thank you. I'd just like to focus on the three options, and I've got a question, but like Councillor Deaker, I prefer, or I'm tending towards option one. I don't see option three as an option because it has no feedback, and I don't think that's right for an 18% rate increase. And option two is probably not appropriate with the COVID situation. So here we are with option one. So my question around is really getting the most out of option one, where it says there's non-line platform community feedback. We can send out hard copy forms. There's a feedback form, will be open-ended, reflecting there's no significant proposals to change the LTP. I just make the point, Mike, that, you know, from my perspective, when I look at the numbers, regulatory is going up $1 million, air's going up 400K, so we're doing some work there. Land and water is going up $2 million. Climate change and hazards going up $1 million. So to me, there is actually a story to be told. And, you know, and this council is quite within its rights, you know, to maybe pull back on some of those increases if it was felt it was appropriate. To me, there's a story to be told and some specific statements to be made, you know, to explain that we've held back on air and now we're doing more on air. We've got things to deliver on land and water, and this is what we're doing, you know. So there's a real story there. And my question really is just how comprehensive is that feedback form, and are we going to take any notice of it, and can we have some specific points in there?
In my mind, to be blunt, the feedback form is an open-ender because we have no significant proposals to consult on. What you just described was going out there and giving a communication piece on what we've already adopted and decided in our LTP, and that's fine.
But we can change our LTP.
But what it's not doing, it's not asking from a decision maker's perspective what specific feedback you want from the community to help you make decisions on things that are really important to this council. It's that brutal. And that's how the Act steers us. And that's why I give you the advice I give you.
Yeah.
Councillor Scott, can I just add in before you start?
I'm trying to be
Look at-
constructive.
No, no, it's very good, Brian. Just if we have a look at and I think it so much of it reflects and the responses we get around the story that we tell to our people and them being able to understand that story. I agree. But if you look at item recommendation 8 that we will vote on, we're now giving. We're directing staff now to go away and prepare the supporting information for community engagement and for council endorsement on the 23rd of March. That's number 8.
No, fair enough. Fair enough.
So no, but I agree with you. The point that you're saying in your direction is that make sure we're telling the very good story or the story that that explains where we're heading to.
Yeah,
to the
no,
community.
thank you. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
I'm happy to move option 1 if
just
looking
one
at the
we've
clock.
got Councillor Forbes.
Pretty much the discussions happened and moved on, but I would like to, I support option 1. I think this is, basically we don't really have to do very much here. We know how the community feel. We know they're going to be peeved again to get this otherwise. And I think it's we offer them the opportunity to express whatever it is that they want to express, but we don't have to go out with anything major because we haven't changed much from what we really haven't changed. So we just have to offer people the opportunity to communicate with us as we normally do. And option 1 covers that perfectly well. That's it.
Thank you, Councillor Forbes. Councillor Wilson, you were going to.
I'm happy to move.
You're happy to move all 8?
Yeah, all 8 as in the page.
As in 8.
Page 43, yeah.
We've got a seconder for that, Councillor Noon. Anyone want to talk on that?
No, thank you.
We'll put the motion. All those in favour?
Aye.
So I haven't got to page 43 yet. And that's option 1. Okay. Yeah.
Yes, that's
approves option 1 and 7. Yeah.
Cool.
Have I caught you up, Brian? Sorry about that to go so quick.
Yeah.
Comfortable and
yeah.
All in favour. That's good. All those in favour. Oh, you want to talk to it first? Sorry. Sorry, I've had Councillor Hope while you're interrupting, Brian, which I appreciate. Councillor Hope actually had a hand up for a comment. Apologies, Councillor Hope. Mike.
Microphone.
I'm not against option 1 completely, but I'm also thinking of those other people that might not engage in this process. Is there another way that we could add into option 1? Perhaps, I know what Mike's saying that, there's not a lot of difference here, but I just would thought, is there any other way that we could communicate? I know this is COVID. I know there's Omicron. Councillor Wilson and I talked about smaller groups, things like that. Is there any way we could add something like this into option 1 as a alternative solution? Could we be a wee bit more flexible? I certainly know that people like, for example, on the Tory scheme won't be happy with their 18% increase, but they'd probably like to talk to someone about it. And yes, I know we're there as councillors, but I'm just saying, is there another opportunity or way that we could converse?
On page 49, option 1 does include some of those things.
Okay. Well, if we
targeted meetings between partners and stakeholders and the council arrange where requested. So
that's
there would be no
partners.
Yeah. Okay. That's
condition suiting to have a meeting at anywhere really, either in the Mahino Hall or the Menahira Domain or whatever. So
or even Outram.
Yeah, that's fine. I'm more than comfortable there. I just wanted to talk about it so that I could tease it out a bit, and I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No,
thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hope. And look, to be honest, that's the part that sold me on with that flexibility.
Yes, I was a bit like that too. Like,
I'll put the motion. All those in favour?
Aye.
Against?
Against.
And noted, councillor. Do you want that noted, sir?
Yes, please.
Yeah, and noted, councillor. Motion is carried. We now go on to item 8, 8.21.
8.21.
8.3.
8.3.
So I'm just flicking through to this. One moment, please, Cora.
Page 54.
Page 54. Mr. Donnelly. This is a paper from our meeting back in December 2021. You take us through that, Mr. Donnelly.
Yeah, well, it's just a paper updating the Finance Committee. There was a resolution in the December 9 council meeting for a working group to meet and then report back to this committee. So that working group, as outlined in the paper, met in early Feb, and so we had a general discussion which kicked off. Obviously, it was the first meeting of that group, and this paper is just pointing out that that's happened, and fulfilling the obligation of that resolution from December to report back.
Mr. Chairman, I'll move the recommendation and thank the members of the working group.
Seconded.
Oh, no.
Before I take that motion, I have a question from I already had hands up. Sorry, Councillor Deaker, but I'm understanding what you're saying, but I've got questions from Councillor Hope, Calvert and Wilson.
Thank you. I'd probably invite Councillors Wilson and Calvert to speak, but this doesn't tell me a lot. This doesn't tell me hardly anything. Councillor expectation around the resolution, the outcome. I'm sure we discussed a lot more than this. It's not just the rating areas and level of benefit the various rating areas received. I thought there'd be a lot more to this paper than there was, and I thought perhaps we could be enlightened here by either Councillor Wilson or Calvert or Councillor Malcolm. Am I not right too? That I mean, I know you weren't playing tiddlywinks or anything like that. Please don't get me wrong, but there's just a lot more here that is not in here, and I know you met, and I know it would have been a very descriptive meeting and a lot of discussion on this flood scheme, but it doesn't tell me that.
Who wants to go first? Okay. Thank you. I'm happy to answer that as a member of the group. I have to say that paragraph 6 does not reflect the meeting that I went to, and hence I have foreshadowed an alternative motion. Because the meeting I attended, and I've got my notes here from when I attended it because I led the debate, is that we needed overarching principles to look at as part of the review. Just reviewing one small part, which is the areas of benefit, was not what we wanted. What we talked about was it should be simple. It should be not looking just at areas of benefit, but exacerbators. It should be understandable and logical, and it should be affordable and fair. So those were the things that we had written down. I've written down from our introduction to that meeting, and I think that we all had some consensus of that. And that's why I certainly appreciate I can't change the report, and thank you, Nick, for doing it, and I appreciate the brevity. I may have lost some of that detail, but the reason I've foreshadowed an alternative motion is that we do bring those things in so that those who have been hounding us to do something know that we are looking much more broadly than just the areas of benefit, because rating doesn't just talk about the areas of benefit. So that's why I foreshadowed a motion which I've distributed to everyone, and I think Liz has got it. I don't know if you need to put it up, but people have got it on their emails. And that, I think, is consistent with the work that we were doing, but others may want to comment.
Look, Councillor Calvert, I'll take you first.
I was at that meeting too, and I concur with Councillor Wilson. There was two things that I thought was going to come out of that, and one was a sort of a one-pager about what was in the scheme and things from the wonderful Michelle Mifflin, who said that she was part of the way through doing that already, and another one about the other things that are in this resolution. And I asked last week what sort of timeframes would be appropriate to have those come back, because we actually need to get on with this. It isn't a sort of next step being, oh yeah, just keep sort of, I don't know what this says, next steps noted above. Once the material's prepared, the working group will meet again. That's sort of just, that could be in 2036 I don't think next things happen unless they've got a time frame. So I really support Councillor Wilson's resolution here, and the reason why I like the time frame, it sounded like Michelle was pretty much close to doing her part of that, and that Dr. Palmer didn't answer my question, so I guess he can do something. But if it can be within 3 weeks prior to the next meeting, gives that working group a chance to meet again and actually try and move this thing forward. And it's really important that we do keep moving it. Yep. So I will second Councillor Wilson's motion, assuming that Councillor Deaker is happy to go with this process, whether or not he's happy to support the motion, to look at this motion instead of just the noting motion.
Just before I go back to Councillor Deaker, I just want to put some clarity around my thoughts on this process and on this report. I'm actually comfortable with the report, but also very comfortable with the direction of the proposed resolution. In that, if you'll see item 6, it is around the clarity that's being prepared by Dr. Palmer's staff on basically a one-pager, so all us as councillors can understand how these schemes work. And I think that part of the process is going to give us then a lot more clarity around who is affected by the schemes, what actually is happening there. Some of us don't understand that, and I think that will then build on to the next stage of it. So, and I'm comfortable that, very comfortable with that report, but also understand what the councillors, having just read that report, what they're proposing. So again, I'm thanking staff for the report and for the action taken so far, but comfortable. So Councillor Deaker, I'm just coming back to you. And I had only taken I hadn't taken a seconder, although I think there might have been one ringing out, but have you noted that? Deaker? No, the councillor, you didn't note that motion, that Councillor Deaker had moved the motion. No. So Councillor Deaker,
I'll withdraw my motion and I will support the Wilson Calvert new motion.
Thanks, Councillor Deaker, and just reiterating that there was hands up in here, and but thank you for your action. So, and I have one more question on screen, which is from Councillor Scott.
Yeah, no, thank you. So my question is to staff, whether it's Mr. Donnelly or Dr. Palmer, just are they happy to implement that resolution, the terms of it and the time frame? Thank you.
Seeing as I wrote the paper, I can answer that. Having only just seen it, I don't know what time it was emailed through. As with all these things, there's a lot in that resolution. It talks about having information on a massive amount of things, all of those things. If you want to do this justice, it's going to take time. So no, I can't guarantee that that what information or what would get provided by 3 weeks before the next finance committee. Going back to what's in the paper, there was a very brief summary of the fact that we met, because apart from the fact that my take on it was that the engineering manager was going to go away and do a summary, basically try and get a simple one-page summary of how the flood scheme worked that might inform how the then how that relates into how the rating is set. I didn't think there was a second piece like Councillor Calvert has mentioned that that Dr. Palmer was going to look at around the rating. I thought there was just the Michelle Mifflin, the engineering manager, was looking at a summary, and then we were going to get together and discuss that. Some of the other things that were discussed were not put in the paper because while there was plenty of discussion that went on and everybody stated their views on where things were, there was no agreement on exactly exactly what the priority was or what was going to happen next. And then I also find it that I don't get where the urgency is coming out of this. As I've said right from the get-go when this was put forward at the end of last year around a flood and drainage rating review, I think that we need to look at the wider rating rather than just the Tyree flood and drainage. But this seems to have become a real priority, and I think that's largely because of emails that are going around in the background from a particular ratepayer saying that that this is urgent. These same ratepayers say that it's urgent that this rate is reviewed and they pay less every year. I think there's a lot more to consider than just rushing some simple piece of analysis to basically say some ratepayers are saying that they're paying too much and therefore we should reduce their rates and make other people pay more. There's a massive amount of analysis and work to do on this if it's going to be done properly. And I'm concerned about how council is setting deadlines and trying to rush this. It's not a simple piece of work. It will have huge implications for a lot of other rates and for all ratepayers wider than the ones who are driving this being done at the moment.
Well, as the person who asked the question, I mean, my recommendation would be that proposed separate resolution be withdrawn, and that the working party obviously need to meet again at some point to actually get some agreement about a path forward. Thank you.
Can I just?
You may talk to it, Councillor Calvert. Sorry, I'm just a slight alteration to that motion.
I really just wanted to respond to Mr. Donnelly and Councillor Scott in the sense that this is encouraging the working party to meet again, and from perhaps Mr. Donnelly thinks that this is going to, we're expecting miracles here, and I can see why he might, but the resolution does say preparing further information and near the beginning of it, and finishes with as to possible next steps. So it isn't saying, by 3 weeks away we'll suddenly have perfection or anything. It's actually intended more information and possible next steps put together means keep this moving along. So I don't understand why you would not keep this moving along. At that time, when a report comes back from the working group, it might well say, these are the things that we need to know now, or that, this is the piece of work which would need to be done to pursue that. And at that stage, we might say it's really expensive, this isn't the time, or whatever it is. Who knows what will come from there? But until we get some information back from there, so I don't think it needs to frighten people to think we need to know everything. It just says further information, possible next steps. So I commend this recommendation, this resolution.
I'm not disagreeing with the intent of the motion to keep the process going, but I am wondering of the clarity of when some of those things need to be considered. And I would be more comfortable in looking at that on receipt of the information from engineering, which is the document that staff member Milford's preparing for us, that we would reconvene a meeting of the project group to set the next steps forward. Because until we have that, we don't fully understand the scheme and what is happening with any of those schemes. So once we had that, that would perhaps direct our next stage of the works that we should be doing.
Dr. Palmer did offer at that meeting to produce some information there. I'm not just imagining it.
No,
you were there.
That's exactly
Kate
right.
was there.
Yep.
He offered to provide further information in exactly the way this is said. So I don't think we need the engineering thing first, because the engineering thing is a description of what's currently happening. And so Dr. Palmer can assume that financially what's currently happening is currently happening, and then do his part. Right now, he doesn't need to wait for, we don't need to come back to the working group with Ms. Mifflin's stuff and then do something, because Dr. Palmer already knows. I don't see.
Have we any further speakers to the motion? There has been a motion put by Councillor Wilson, seconded by Councillor Calvert. Have I any further questions? Councillor Forbes?
I'm just concerned again. So I'm just concerned again about the asking our staff to go and do this, creating something on the fly when we don't really know what it's going to cost, how much time it's going to take, and our staff are telling us that it's going to take a lot more effort than we think. This is not something simple.
Yeah, Councillor Forbes, I'm at fault here. The motion has actually been put. It should be debate on the process, and that's my error I've heard there. So, is there any debate on the motion?
Well, you can add that debate as debate.
Thank you. Well spoken. Councillor Robertson.
Agree with Councillor Forbes, and having been through this process a number of times in the past, there is a lot of information that goes into this. Every single one of those points that's been raised in this resolution. It's not a one-pager, and if it was, I'd be very concerned. We haven't done our job correctly in answering those questions if it is. This is a highly technical, and yeah, I don't think I need to say anything more on that. It will take a lot of time. And yeah, we can't do it justice, and exactly what Councillor Forbes said, we should be hearing from staff on what is involved in that, what resources would need to go into that, and what other work programs would suffer as a result of needing to divert our attention into that at the level that would be required. Thanks.
Any further discussion?
I'll exercise my right of reply when it's appropriate.
Exit right now. Yep.
Okay, right of reply. Thank you. This comes out of an agreed process that we had at the working party. There are two parts to it. The one pager is in how the scheme works, just for clarity, because that was actually underlying. It's really hard to tell the story. When you're telling the story of how the scheme works, we should be able to tell that clearly. If we can't, then there is a separate issue. So that's one part. That's the one pager. The other part was we raised all of those other issues. In the past, we have relied on a rating system only on areas of benefit. We agreed at that meeting that there were other things that could be considered and should be considered, And we asked the staff to consider how we would take that forward. That is what, it's not a huge piece of work. Yes, we discussed that you could be as complicated as a Stalia report. We said, no, we just want to start that conversation of how we could get to this point and get a report back. That is on what the next steps are. It's not a huge expensive piece, or it may be saying that they can't do this without doing X, Y, and Z. That is the bit of work that we're asking for in this. The reason I've done it is because we have told people that we're having these meetings and that we're prepared to look at other things. The report itself does not bring into account those other factors, and we have to show faith that we are pursuing this fully, not just continuing to look at areas of benefit. Had the report said that we're going to consider other things, I would be able to. I can't change the report. So this is just noting that those are the matters that we raised and that we're expecting to hear some more things on. It's not going to give us the answer at the next meeting. It would be churlish to think that we could get to that point, but it is about us just getting to that point that we have all of those areas in our sights to have a discussion as to the next steps. That is where this takes us. It doesn't take us very down the track. It will take a long time, but we owe it to ourselves that we can tell a story. If you want to go to page 150 of the long-term plan and just look, say, at our bus, this is just the sort of storytelling we need to tell. Page 150 of the long-term plan, I think, will take you to the maps of the buses. It doesn't even tell a consistent story of how we rate for buses. One, we rate by area nearness or proximity to a bus stop, and in Wakatipu we do it regionally wide. I'm not criticising that, but it's really hard to tell a consistent story. So pages 145 to 149 give the other maps. They're not clear how we tell that story. That's what we're delving into. It's not just about Tairi. We're lifting it up and saying, what are those principles and how do we do it? To start that conversation, we need to start talking about things other than areas of benefit. That is all we're starting to do. This is what the agreed path was forward by 3 people in the room, I think, and by all of us at that meeting. And all I'm just doing to show faith in that process is that it is documented somewhere, because it's not in the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. I will now put the motion. All those in favour?
Aye.
Against?
Against.
I have 3 against, which is Scott, Robertson and Forbes.
I'm abstaining because I don't know where it's about.
And Councillor Laws is still absent.
I thought he said he was abstaining.
Yeah, yes, I will put him down as abstaining. One, two, three. It's 7. The motion carries in favour 7-3 with 1 abstention. Councillor Forbes.
Did you want to call it a division?
No, that's carried. Yep. Continuing public.
Mr. Chairman, can I make a suggestion? It's now.
I'm just going to do exactly that.
Okay, and we'll adjourn this meeting.
Yes.
Reconvene at the conclusion of the PE council meeting.
Yes.
Public excluded.
Public excluded meeting. So moved by Councillor Noon that we adjourn the meeting now and resume it at the end of the publicly excluded session of the council meeting when that arrives.
Seconded.
Seconded by Councillor Hope.
Yep.
Those in favour?
Aye.
Aye.